So I actually like that. I like it when not all parts of government are controlled by the same party. It's really good to have a checks and balances as we move through. It makes me get to consensus.
And I've told my kids their whole lives that the way you grow as an individual and the way all of us advance together is you have to have this combination of humility and confidence. You got to be humble enough to know you don't know everything. And even more important, honest enough to admit when you're wrong.
We need more politicians like that right now. I don't care if you're red, blue, green, yellow, or whatever. We need more politicians like that.
I'm not going to be filing headline lawsuits. If a lawsuit that I file makes a headline, it's because it's a big suit. But the goal is not the headline. The goal is to make things work.
Well, welcome to another episode of the Leadership Lab. And this time, I am excited that one of my great friends, Senator Nathan Johnson, is in studio with me today. And we're going to talk about everything politics and how that intersects with some of what my listeners are talking about. Not necessarily just with healthcare, what have you, but you're running for a very important race here in the state of Texas. And so I wanted you to introduce first yourself to the audience, and I have several questions that I have for you, and most of my listeners are going to know that I enjoy politics, but I enjoy politics from the standpoint of policy and what are we doing best for the end user or the citizen, or in my element, I'm always talking about the healthcare, the patient, things like that. So Senator, introduce yourself to our audience and who you are, and then we'll get a little bit more into why the AG's race is so important here in the state of Texas.
Thank you, Asbel. I'm Nathan Johnson. I'm a state senator from Dallas, Texas, and it is a great privilege and a lot of fun for me to be here with one of my great friends, you, Asbel, and someone who is a great leader. And so to be on here in your leadership lab is really very exciting for me, quite a privilege. And the question is why I'm running for this office or what's at stake. And I guess let's
dive into that. But before we get there, let me ask you, what brought you into politics? So let's rewind. Tell the audience a little bit about you. I know who you are, but many are going to be listening to this now that may not even be from the state of Texas. A lot will be from the state of Texas as well. But tell us a little bit about who Nathan Johnson is. Give us a little bit of a peek underneath it. You don't tell us everything, but just give us a peek underneath it.
So less than an hour. Okay. I'm actually a native Texan. Technically, I was born in Fort Worth, Texas. My dad was an adjunct at TCU at the time. We moved when I was 1, hence no accent. But I came back for law school at UT, great law school. Went there, got out in 1993. Bad year to graduate, but somebody in Dallas, Texas offered me a job. So I took it, and I made my adult life in Dallas, raised 3 kids there, and practiced law for a while. Had a unusual detour for a lawyer. I don't know if I'd call it a detour. I had a phase. I left the practice of law and composed music. At first classical. Eventually I figured out that was a kind of a hard way to make a living. And eventually I broke into television scoring, what actually is one of the most famous animated series of all time, Dragon Ball Z. Did that for a run, and some interesting global technological and financial things happened that led me out of the music industry after a decade of, the latter part of which I was actually making a living. Went back to being a lawyer, small law firm, commercial litigator. Had a good time with that as my kids were growing up, and then I saw a window open in politics. I happen to believe that the region I'm from is pretty centrist generally. Had always leaned conservative, but mostly people wanted to be able to do their work, make money, and feel good about the world, that things are working right. And I thought maybe that is a place that I could break in, even though all politics is partisan. And I'm on the Democratic side of the map there. And that city was not. But when I saw what I saw as a real productive Republican with a good political conscience and skills get knocked out in the Republican primary, I saw not just a window open because I thought maybe I could win that. I felt an obligation to win it because I think Texas has so much to offer to its residents and so much to offer the country. that I didn't want to see it squandered with a bunch of silly partisan theater. And I thought it was time to take my shot at it then, back in 2018.
Well, here's what I will tell you about it. And he brought up as people that are listening today, I don't really care what part of the aisle you sit, whether it's red, whether it's blue. Of course, we like to define people by what party they represent, but I like to look at things through the lens of what are your priorities? I don't always agree with everyone all the time. I don't agree with everything that you do. You don't agree with everything that I do, and I'm okay with it. I like to have these.
It would be boring if we agreed with each other
Dear
all the time.
God, I always say that. Can you imagine if there was 100 more Asbels? That'd be awful.
I was like,
we don't want
enough.
100 more Nathan
Johnsons. There was a friend of mine once said, Nathan, if I agreed with you on everything, I would lose respect for you.
That's exactly right. I love that. Here's what I will tell you from those that when I met you for the first time, I never encountered a politician like you before, and I've been involved in politics for 20 years. And I still remember it like the day is long. And this was about an air ambulance issue that we were having, and I actually showed up at a health plan conference. And I remember you opined on something. I was like, he's not writing that. And I remember talking to the lady at the time. I was going to a dinner that evening, and I said, can you set me at his table? And I remember sitting down beside you. You probably have a different story about, but I remember sitting down beside you, and I remember bringing that up, and you didn't at once try to excuse. You said, you know what? You're exactly right. And I'm paraphrasing what you did. I probably misspoke at that time. I really didn't know. And you're exactly right. I hadn't done enough research on that. And I looked at you and I said, that's a politician that I like. Someone that immediately recognized that they hadn't done all their full research and admitted it right away. I wish we had more politicians like that now. We need more politicians like that right now. I don't care if you're red, blue, green, yellow, or whatever. We need more politicians like that. And so I want to jump right into it because I think this is a really good segment. This is my own personal piece of it. I've got friends on all sides of the aisle, because I can sit and have conversations like this. So I really want you to talk that you are right now a state senator. You've done some yeoman's work. I think is this your third year, fourth year?
I've done 4 sessions.
Four sessions
I've been in for
already.
8 years.
So you've been in 8 years already. So let's talk about going from a state senator, that there's the Texas Attorney General. It's a little different than on the federal side. You want me to stop there?
Yeah, actually, Asbel, I'd like to go back to you describing when we met.
Yeah.
Because I think that was an important moment for me in my political growth. At the moment you confronted me with being wrong about something, I was kind of riding high. I had prepared really well. The subjects were things I knew a lot about. I was going up against people with more power and experience than I had, and I was killing it. And then a question came up, and I did not know what I was talking about, and I answered it anyway. And when you just cold asked me, what do you know about this? And I said, nothing. And I shouldn't have answered that question because someone said something to me on the way in, and that's not a good basis for answering a question. And I learned pretty quickly that you did know something about it. Yeah. And I've told my kids their whole lives that the way you grow as an individual and the way all of us advance together is you have to have this combination of humility and confidence. You got to be humble enough to know you don't know everything, confident enough to know that you can learn it and that it's okay to admit when you don't know it, and even more important, honest enough to admit when you're wrong.
Yeah, and I'm going to bring this a little personal. You brought this up, the word humility, but my wife and I were speaking about this over the weekend, and my wife and I, we're very faith-based, and there's a lot of conversations that we're talking about where 2 Chronicles 7:14 says, if my people will humble themselves and pray, and it goes on. And it first starts with humility. And if we would see things through the eyes of humility, and that's what I try to do as a faith-based leader, as a leader, as an owner of my own company, as a dealing by, is because humility is really hard when you know how to make things happen. And I appreciate you saying that resonated with me when you did that. That resonated with my wife and I. We saw something in you that you generally don't see in politicians, and I appreciate that you bring that forward. And I've seen you example that to this day. I don't always agree on maybe how you do things, and that's okay. Like we said, my God, help us if that happens. But I enjoy that you constantly, you research, you're passionate about what you believe in. And in my opinion, as we move into this, I'd like to talk a little bit about this race, this
Yeah.
AG's race. I've learned, you've taught me some things that I didn't really realize happened with the Attorney General. I know it happens on the federal side. These aren't elected positions on the federal side. They're appointed. They have to be approved by the Senate. But in Texas, it's an elected position.
That's right.
So talk us a little bit about this Attorney General, why you're passionate about, a little bit about that for some of us that may just be learning, kind of understanding what happens in the AG's office.
Every state has its own type of Attorney General. They're pretty similar, but they are distinct from the federal government where they just appoint them, right? The framers of the Texas Constitution distrusted power generally. They distrusted power in the executive, the legislature, the judiciary, and
I agree with them, actually.
and the private sector. They distrusted power. So they created this constitutionally independent executive office that has the power to be that check and the balance that we all read about in high school in the Federalist Papers, and fulfill that role in commerce and in government. And so they vested it with the power to represent the state, to take the position of the state, and charged it with protecting the people. In Texas, that has turned into one of the most influential and powerful offices in the country. The Texas AG has a $1.34 billion biennial budget. It has 4,000 employees. It has 800 lawyers. It's a big operation.
Oh, yeah.
And some of it is doing things that people, unless you experience it directly, you're not thinking about most of the time, like child support collection, right? Are you going after deadbeats? Yeah. Are you figuring out a way to help people who can't afford to make their payments get back on their feet so they can make their payments? Yeah. All these things. And you're responding to people in a timely fashion. Just basic government service is a significant portion of what the Attorney General's office does. Another portion of it that people don't think about is making sure government works. We have, I don't know how many hundreds of agencies in this state, but they all have to operate in the context of the law as the legislature passes them. And Asbel, as an 8-year senator, I can tell you that the laws the legislature passes are not always crystal clear. And so they need legal guidance from the Attorney General, not necessarily partisan legal guidance from the Attorney General. What ought you to be doing? What can you do? What's within your purview? Where are you acting in conflict with other statutes that have been passed? So the Attorney General is a legal advisor to the governor, to the legislature, and to state agencies. They can even have the power of signaling the private sector of what is legal, what is not legal, what sorts of programs can you pursue. So all that's kind of the functional side of it. They can also actually affect public safety. People think of the AG as the top cop, but actually we have police departments and we have district attorneys and we have local county prosecutors. Those are the top cops. They're the people who really are enforcing the law and order side of things. But the Attorney General has vast resources, as we just talked about. And if the Attorney General is doing his or her job properly, they are a resource to district attorneys. The district attorneys can call upon the Attorney General's office and often do for investigations and prosecutions of great scale. So the Attorney General very much does play a role in public safety, but it's not by preempting your local government. It's actually working with the local government, and that's one of the problems we've had under the current regime.
So let me ask you this. This is so not going to this outline, but you just made my thought process happen. So tell me how the legislature is involved in the workings of the Attorney General. So they set your budgets. I'm assuming they approve the financial side of it. So there is some accountability from it's not like they can just run rogue. Or
no,
can they?
It's actually a great question that's frequently asked in a partisan context. Nathan, you're running as a Democrat. You are a Democrat, and it's likely to be a Republican-controlled legislature. Won't they just strip the office of all power? And my answer to that is they can't, because constitutionally I have some significant powers, or the Attorney General has significant powers, but also functionally.
So if they change, not to interrupt you, but if they want to strip the office of power, because that was my next question, was going to be talking about, sometimes we see things through the lens of if you're a Republican or a Democrat,
right.
And I'm sure I'm having some people that are going to be thinking, Asbel, I cannot believe this, that they're just tuning it out. So that's why I'm wanting to ask these questions. So
they're important.
In order to change the Constitution components of what they've given to the office, there's a whole process that would have to happen there,
Yeah,
correct?
you'd have to get 2/3 of the legislature to change the Constitution to strip power of the Attorney General, which is going to be really hard. And then it'd have to go to the voters to get a 2/3, or sorry, to get a 50% vote in November. And I just don't think these fundamental principles are things that people want to give up, Republican or Democrat. That's the other reason I think that it's important. And you know probably that I'm in a primary election here. I think that legislative experience is very important to someone serving the Attorney General's office, because if there's going to be a confrontation with the legislature over the extent of the statutory powers or the extent of the funding, you need someone who knows how to work with the legislature. Of course, I've worked with my Democratic colleagues all the time. I also work with my Republican colleagues. It's why I've passed 135 bills as a Democrat in a Republican-dominated legislature.
And I think that's important for viewers to understand that right now.
Yeah.
That your 4 sessions that you've been a state senator for 8 years, is you've passed 135 pieces of legislation in a largely Republican-dominated legislature.
That's right. That's right.
Which tells me that you know how to practically work through this, which is why it's really important that when we understand this, that we have got to, number one, as Americans, number two, as a Texan, to look at this not through the lens of, oh, you're a Democrat, so I'm just writing you off, or you're a Republican, so I'm just writing you off, is understanding how you pragmatically go. So tell me, as you run, and we talked about the AG's office, because right now you're working through the primary. The primary is coming up, March 5th?
March 3rd.
March 3rd.
March 3rd. Early voting starts in a week.
And so right now we're going to have to be looking at things through those lenses.
We are.
And what does that mean? And what can Nathan Johnson, which he's aligning with the Democrat platform, so that comes with it, whether you're on a Democrat platform or Republican
party. I don't actually read platforms, but
I love that. Like the party side of it, but maybe not necessarily the platform. So talk to me about what makes you different, unique. What are you going to bring to the Attorney General's office that may not be happening right now? Because there's people that feel disenfranchised right now. Talk to me a little bit about what you're going to be doing.
And the first thing I'm going to bring to the Attorney General's office is get rid of something that is going on in the Attorney General's office. And Asbel, you and I, we agree on a whole lot of stuff, and there's places where we don't. But where we disagree, we're respectful about it, and we have conversations about it. And generally, we both come away more informed and are able to reach a smarter conclusion for both of us. Sometimes the same one, sometimes a different one, but we're both closer to what's probably right. You know, the Attorney General's office, particularly under Ken Paxton, not so much under Abbott and Cornyn, has become a reflexive partisan theatrical tool. And I don't really think that benefits anybody. And I know a lot of Republicans who are really disappointed that office in particular requires a certain amount of independence. There is a rule of law to be upheld. There are constitutional foundations to be maintained. There are democratic institutions that need to be reinforced and strengthened. Not torn down. And a lot of what we've seen in a hyper-partisan tide of the last several years, not limited, of course, to Ken Paxton, not limited to Texas, is a disregard of the fundamental obligations that we all have to each other. And that is figuring out how can the office that I hold, how can the power that I wield be used to make people's lives better? Sometimes that means a more competitive marketplace. Sometimes it means public safety. Sometimes it means investigating and rooting out corruption or abuse of power by whomever, whenever, and whichever party they're in. I think that's what's important here. And I do think people are going to they're hungry for that message, I think. It's reassuring to know that what happens in government is not just a football game of very real consequences, that we're trying to do something in particular here.
So through that lens, because I think you brought up some really good things that I'm glancing over my notes, because I wanted to lead into that. Of course, I'm in healthcare leadership. A lot of stuff is happening in technology, innovation. And so from the Attorney General's office, specifically here through the lens of Texas or what have you, what elements or what areas would you directly be involved in that? I know you're basically interpreting laws, you're making sure things are, but when it comes to things like innovation, delivery, things like that, does the AG's office really weigh in on anything relative to that?
The AG's office is going to weigh everything that has to do with laws in the private sector, including healthcare, including shoes, including food. It doesn't mean it's a meddling office. It just means I think of the Attorney General's office almost like a referee. You look at the basketball court, where's the lines? Everybody has to play according to the rules. You're not allowed to walk up and punch the other player in the face when he takes a shot. Those are some basic rules. So, I can be more specific in a second. But generally speaking, in the private sector, I want you to think about two things in the private sector. Number one, it ain't all about you. We all have an obligation to each other. We have not just an obligation to succeed in business. We all have an obligation to make the world a better place, our communities better. I know that sounds a little schmaltzy, but I believe it, right? Secondly, in the long-term business interests, it's not good to allow your community and your state to suffer. So you do have an interest in the long term. So I affect business interests in that sense, but also in a more direct sense. Innovation, entrepreneurialism, those things can be stifled when we don't enforce fair competition laws. And I think those have gone dormant a little bit. And the longer they're dormant, the more concentrated power becomes. The more concentrated power becomes, the more control and influence it has over government, which adds to the increasing amount of power. So there's no industry, there's no person, there's no company that's on a direct hit list right now. There are areas that I think are naturally prone to hyperconsolidation. Tech being the leading example. There's a great deal of consolidation in the healthcare area. As long as everybody's playing by the rules and it's serving the market, great. Where it's not a question of persecuting and prosecuting, but it is a question of making sure we set up rules that force markets to work for people.
So of course, tech and healthcare is really huge in Texas.
Yeah, AI,
of course,
comes into this context,
it's huge,
right?
yeah.
And I did pass an AI bill that had to do with scams against everybody, financial scams used or perpetuated using artificial intelligence. But I was also involved in the Senate in early looks at how to regulate the use of artificial intelligence in healthcare. In insurance coverage, in evaluation of claims, in use within provider practices. It wasn't my initial legislation, but I was very involved in trying to improve it. I think that stuff still has to be developing in real time. People don't think about the Attorney General's office as responding to changes in the world, but it very much does. We are looking down the road to what might happen. And how do we set it up so that we're not all scrambling to recover from our failure to set up a good regulatory environment? We have to anticipate problems and anticipate opportunities and set up the environment so that businesses can function optimally in order to produce the outcomes that we want.
Which I agree with you on that. And I know that here in the state of Texas, I'm about the free markets personally, but I do think that in healthcare, there needs to be some regulatory framework around that as well. Or we have what we've got going on right now with fraud, waste, and abuse initiatives. And this is where I think the AG's office, working in coordination with the federal government, does some really good things to ensure that we just don't have the wild, wild west in healthcare. That's not good for the patient. And so, Senator, I'd like for you to kind of discuss just a little bit around, and I want to bring this down to, most people don't think at the level that we're talking right now. And so I don't want to talk over people. I want to talk to them. And I want to talk to those that are listening that, okay, Asbel, we get it. You're a policy wonk. You're definitely a policy wonk. You're also a regulator. And if I'm not careful, what happens is the average American will disconnect. The average Texan will begin to disconnect saying, okay, I don't really understand what they're saying. And so they immediately will go to, well, I'm a Republican, so I'm just going to vote for whoever's red.
Right.
And that may not be the best solution. Or I'm just blue and I'm going to vote for blue, which would inure to your benefit. Let's talk to the average individual. Why to them is the importance of the person in the Attorney General's office important? So right now we have a governor who aligns with the Republican Party. If you were to get elected, you would align, you're running as a Democrat. And so why is that not scary to them. Or, if I'm a Republican, I'm just nervous. Like somebody's going to be in here that's a Democrat, and what could that do to the agenda or whatever? Can you talk a little bit about that from the Attorney General's perspective?
And I'll try not to be too abstract. We'll start abstract and come down a little bit. I've had a lot of Republican friends say to me, we need a Democrat in statewide office, particularly the Attorney General. And the fact is, we all behave better when we know there's some checks in place. And I'll go back to 2018 when I was first elected. That was a wave year. It was the last, from an electoral perspective, that was the last good year for Democrats. It was the most recent good year for Democrats. I hope it's not the last one. And I think we should all hope it's not the last one, because I believe in competition in free markets in the private sector. I believe in competition in the political sector.
Absolutely.
So in 2018, when Democrats flipped 12 Texas House seats, 2 Texas Senate seats, and came within small single digits of multiple statewide offices, the following legislative session was described by most Capitol veterans as the most successful in a generation, because silly partisan theatrics were punished and serious work was rewarded. And so there was plenty of silly theatrics that session, but none of it went anywhere. It was just a show. It wasn't reality. What we've had since then is the silly theatrics became reality. Instead, people got to work. That's when we passed education reform. Now, why does it remember in particular for the Attorney General's office? We are at a time when not only are people disregarding the rules, there's great pressure to disregard the rules. We're seeing the governor make pronouncements and take actions that the governor has no power to do. And the governor, all due respect, was the Attorney General previously. He knows better. He cannot order universities to not hire H-1B immigrants to work at universities, to be world. He doesn't have the power to say, no, we're not going to recruit the best talent on earth to come to Texas. And an Attorney General probably could have called him on the phone and said, hey, Greg, you don't have the authority to do that. Don't make me issue an Attorney General opinion of my own accord and call you out for it. They're going to know that the theatrical stuff that gets people riled up doesn't work. And it's so hard for people to be aware of everything that's going on. So all it takes is just a little bit of disinformation, and it sways people. I would absolutely be a check to that. But let me give you another example. There's a law right now that the legislature passed mostly for show called the anti-ESG law, right? And that is environmental and social governance. And Texas passed a law that basically barred financial institutions that have an investment program in green energy from doing business with the state of Texas. Created a blacklist, a hit list, call it what you will. I thought it was a terrible unconstitutional law. And it's not because I'm opposing the oil and gas industry. I don't. I think it's been wonderful, continues to be a very important industry in Texas. But do I think that we ought to interfere with the free flow of private capital in capital markets? No. Do I think that it's constitutional to bar speech by financial institutions? No, you can't be for free speech only when you like what they're saying. I don't think we can say we support independent business judgment when we pass a law saying we don't like where you're investing. So that law went to court, and a Trump-appointed federal district court judge struck it down as unconstitutional about 4 or 5 days ago. Rule of law is still alive. Now, why is the Attorney General relevant to that? Because it's the Attorney General who decides whether or not the state of Texas is going to appeal that ruling. Are we going to drag that out? Are we going to send it off to another political court and jeopardize the right holding? No, if I were Attorney General, that's the end of the line. And we can all get back to work recognizing that free markets ought to govern freely, and that bond prices don't go up when we make it harder to borrow by driving out financial institutions. We got very weedy, and it's hard to follow all of that. But I think it was important to just dive into the weeds for a second and say, point by point, day by day, there are obscure but monumentally significant issues that the Attorney General deals with that affect the ability of your cities to pick up the trash, that affect constitutional rights, civil rights, voting rights. They are in the Attorney General's office.
This episode is sponsored by Solutions Group Services, healthcare leaders' go-to source for maximizing reimbursement and inspiring innovation. At Solutions Group Services, Our technology and consulting expertise help organizations recover millions in hidden revenue without disrupting their workflow. Through our flagship AI-powered tech product, Black Ink, we reveal the dollars stuck in insurance claims and give you the map to get them back. Because for healthcare leaders, they know leaving money on the table isn't an option for their organization. Learn more at solutionsgroup.com and discoverblacking.com.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to note that what I'm hearing as you're talking through in those weeds, and some people might be listening thinking,
Sorry about the weeds. It's a weedy job.
No, the kind of, your eyes kind of glaze over. But what I'm hearing through the process, because this is not my area of expertise, but I understand and recognize it, is that the rule of law still works.
It does. Not always, but most of the time. And I think we all have an obligation, Republican or Democrat.
That's correct.
To ensure that the rule of law prevails.
And that's probably the most important, that it works, it has to prevail. And so what do we do? How does that work? And I really like the analogy that you gave about sometimes the checks and balances is needed. So I actually like that. I like it when not all parts of government are controlled by the same party. It's really good to have a checks and balances as we move through. It makes me get to consensus, makes me sit down. I'm not going to always agree to everything that you say. It's rational. It's rational thinking through the process. So let's kind of humanize. I want to humanize Nathan Johnson. I was having a conversation earlier with a business owner, and we were kind of talking about some stuff that had transpired, so not political, over the last 2 or 3 days. Number one was around, because we're just coming off of the Super Bowl and we're coming off the halftime show. People thought different things regardless of the individual. That I'm Puerto Rican, so I enjoy the culture side of it. But it's very interesting where you stood on that. But we talked about the who and the what. And this is what I mean by that is, who is Nathan Johnson? If I can keep you in a what perspective, I can dehumanize. I don't have to see you as who you are. I just see you as, oh, that's the Democrat. I'm not voting ever for Democrat. Or that's a Republican. I'm never voting for a Republican, when I put you into a what category. But when I understand who you are, you wake up in the morning the same. I remember being with someone that went and prayed over the Senate. This was several months ago, and definitely more of a conservative thinking outlet. But in that Senate prayer, there were Democrats, there were Republicans with the same hurts. They had the same needs that everyone else had. They all joined around and prayed together collectively. I'm like, that is who we are. That's humanity. And so I want, who are you? Like, outside of this politics, the attorney, you mentioned a little bit about that you like to play classical music. Tell us who is Nathan Johnson? What makes Nathan Johnson get up in the morning?
It may sound cliche, but I love my role as an elected leader, because I care. It sounds cliche, but I care so much about what I do every single day. And I care about the people I work with. And I love the challenge and the opportunity of working with other people, even when I don't agree with them. You talked about being in the Senate. I think part of what makes me successful in the Senate is I care about my colleagues, even the ones I fight with and vote against every time. And I think we need that in the Attorney General's office. The Attorney General is going to have to work with the legislature, with Republicans, with Democrats. That's real. That is a real part of me. But I think you mean more about like the peanut butter that I like to make.
I love that. Yeah, it's my wife. You make the best peanut. My wife loves your peanut butter.
I mean, these kind of these kind of qualities matter, right? Because when we have interests outside of our work, it allows us to connect in ways. And if you don't care about each other, if you don't relate to each other in a lot of different ways, you're less likely to work together.
Exactly right.
It makes it easier to demonize people when you don't see them as people. So as people, I love to cook. I love to make my own peanut butter. It's very, very good. I'm calling it NJ4TXAGPB.
See, he needs to go out there and he needs to market that. Let's market that for you. It's good peanut butter.
It's good peanut butter. I do still like to play the piano some. I don't.
If they Google, you did something. I think it was your daughter playing. You had composed something, because if you go Google and put it, you can see it. Like it's on. It's in. It's.
You mean the little
YouTube,
piece?
Maybe YouTube.
The little piece I wrote for little Sophie.
Yeah.
When Sophie was 8, I wrote her a piece called Sophie's Light Blues.
That's right. Sophie's Light Blues.
And I think that's around the time I had stopped writing music professionally, and that was still just weaving around in my brain in my sleep. And it was just one of the most delightful parenting moments ever.
Yeah, and I'll tell you this too, and this is the one thing that I like about you. That's the creative side, which is very interesting. Generally, if you're in the arts, you've got a creativity to you.
Yeah.
I'm a creative soul, but I'm a musician, so I understand what it is to be creative and get my creative juice flowing. But that was the one thing about you. But to go back to, I want to tell a story for the audience. Because you and I don't always agree on stuff all the time. And I love that because I just know that if I'm going to go again, there's some things like he'll argue, I'm like, I'm not passionate about this. I'm going to defer to you.
Go with it.
But if it is something that we disagree on philosophically, we're going to debate it. And I'm just going to, I just disagree with your viewpoint on that. But go for it, because I generally will focus on those things. We agree with 80% of the things, these two things. I'm just going to agree to disagree with you, and may the best man win. Go for it.
And sometimes how you think is more important than your conclusion.
Yeah. Kind of thinking through the process. And that's kind of what I'm encouraging people as they look at the different platforms as you're running right now. For those that are listening to this right now, why is the primary important? I think some people don't really understand what's happening in March. Generally speaking, it's less than 20%. What's the stats of people that show up at the primary?
I think this cycle we're expecting considerably more than 2/3 of what would happen in a presidential election primary cycle, maybe half of what we see in general. But still, I think we're talking about 1.7 million Democrats and maybe 1.7 million, 2 million Republicans, maybe 2 million Democrats. But we're still talking about millions of people. But the primary is significantly less than the total voting age population, significantly less than the turnout. And people who vote in the primary almost 100% of the time vote in the general election. So it's a super important thing to get out there and make your voice heard. But more than that, the significance of the primary is that it determines who's running in the general. And after decades of hyper-partisan gerrymandering, after recent years of hyper-toxic partisanship, there's a push in the primaries to elect people that you feel like you can identify with 100% of the time. And recognize that if you're a Republican, there's a lot of Republicans who don't agree with you 100% of the time. And if you're a Democrat, there's a lot of Democrats who don't agree with you 100% of the time. Sure. And so you want to look for somebody, first of all, who can win the election, right? If you're a Democrat and you agree with Nathan Johnson 95% of the time, why are you worried about the other 5 if he can win and the others can't? Same way, if you're a Republican, you want somebody who can beat Nathan Johnson, for example, in the general election. Let me tell you, that's going to be hard. But yeah, good. You got that joke. Yeah, no, really.
I agree.
So the primary, it's important you get somebody who knows how to run a campaign, who knows how to motivate your party, in my case, the Democrats, motivate Democrats to turn out, cooperate with other candidates, but really importantly, pull over this independent block of voters who might routinely break right or routinely break left. Get them overwhelmingly to go to your side. At that point, the election's over if that happens. On the other end of the spectrum, though, there are many Republicans who are disaffected by what's been going on, and they want the confidence that there's somebody else that they trust in that office, even if they don't agree with them 100% of the time. Maybe they respect my decision-making process. Maybe they respect that my real job is to uphold the rule of law for everybody, no matter what party they're in. If those people cross over, the election's over. And yay, for me, the election's over, but as far as the more important thing is the public well served. And I think the public will be well served. And in the primary, your vote is going to be extremely important to determining who that nominee is and who the winner is in November.
So let's talk about that. I've got a few more questions for you. And one I want to talk about as we're kind of winding down here is, if you made it into office as Attorney General, what are 2 things? I know we talked about there's probably a lot that's going through your mind, but you can only pick 2, and don't be a politician and say, I have 4. Like 2 things that would say, these are the 2 things I would really like to have fixed in my tenure as Attorney General.
The first thing is going to take time, but it's one everyone wants fixed, is I want the public to have faith that the Attorney General's office is working for them. And I think the public has been systematically convinced that it doesn't. And
so that's a little Pollyannish. So let me ask you, because we
How?
all want that. How would you do
Yeah.
that? Tell me how you would do that.
The one-word answer is slowly. Everybody wants you to come in and I'm going to announce this policy. I'm going to create these divisions. That's just talk. You really want to earn someone's trust, you got to earn it over time. And I'm going to earn it slowly and quietly by hiring the best people who can leave their ideology at the door and come in and do the work of regulating markets, investigating corruption, making sure that the Medicaid system is working, cooperating with district attorneys, handling your child support, upholding the rule of law, advising agencies. All that stuff is not that exciting. I'm not going to be filing headline lawsuits. If a lawsuit that I file makes a headline, it's because it's a big suit, but the goal's not the headline. The goal is to make things work. People will believe in that office again when they have a sense that it's doing something other than acting like a part of a political apparatus. And they will see it. They will see it. They will have confidence.
I love that. And I know all I can go is from my own personal experiences and knowing you. And that one time, that story that we talked about at the very beginning of this episode shows me you're not the consummate politician that tells us what we want to hear, not what we need to hear. So I appreciate you saying it's going to take time. I want to restore faith in the office, but it's not going to happen overnight.
And I don't think you're going to get people's faith by promising them something you can't deliver. And
I appreciate that in a politician.
Well,
I literally appreciate that.
I took a risk this weekend. We had a very large crowd in a primary debate. And I said, look, I've heard a lot of things on the stage tonight about what my opponents would do, but frankly, that's not within the power of the Attorney General. And I'm not going to promise you something I can't do. And I had a dozen people come up after me afterwards and say to me, thank you. Thank you for not trying to sell us something. And then another just really touching story. I'd forgotten this happened, but we had an event at a brewery up in Dallas. It was a lot of fun, a lot of people. And after I spoke, a little older lady came up and said, I want to do a testimonial. I said, okay, I handed her the microphone. And she said, a number of years ago, I started making a very modest donation to Nathan Johnson every month. And I messed it up. And I accidentally clicked every week instead of every month. She said she noticed it and said, oh, gosh, I don't know if I can afford what I've just done. And she said, before I could call him up, Nathan called me on the phone. Not his staff. Nathan called me and said, is that what you meant to do? And I said, no, it isn't. And Nathan took care of it. And she said, he's looking out for me, even when I didn't know it.
What a fantastic story.
And I forgot it. I was so grateful that she stood up and told that.
You know what? It's those stories that say he thought about me, like thinking something might be wrong with this donation. Yeah. Who does that?
I don't want to.
And so not to blow smoke your way, but that's a testament of what I've observed. And I know many others that know you personally have observed. Are you perfect? Hell no.
No.
Sorry. I'll say it for you. But you learn as lessons learned when we stumble, we know, what do I need to do to reset? And so you reset back to your core and your purpose, and that's your kids. Last question I want to ask you is what keeps Nathan Johnson up at night?
I am worried that our modern political discourse is so overwhelmed with misinformation and its much more sinister cousin, disinformation, that it's hard for any of us to make sense, to even make good decisions, right? We can only make decisions that are as good as the information we have. And the flow isn't slowing, and the dishonesty is more brazen than it has ever been before. And people's desire to fact check is lower, and the desire to tear people down on the basis of accusations is higher, or to dismiss things that really are true just because it doesn't fit your preferences. And it's all kind of churned by the vast pace of information flowing. And that keeps me up at night. But I'm starting to see signs that the tide is turning there, that people are catching up to the digital waves that have been hitting them, slowing down, thinking, not believing everything that comes their way, listening to different sources. And I don't want to be Pollyanna about that either. Like I said, it keeps me up at night. But I think for the first time in the last several years, I have seen people more willing to slow down and question what they're hearing and to dig in and be engaged.
So I'm going to bring it from a faith-based perspective, and we're going to end on this note because I didn't realize that's what you were going to say.
Should I try a new answer?
No, I love it because it goes right into a Proverbs that says, pray for wisdom. And the scriptures say, if you pray for wisdom, God gives it freely to everyone. You don't even have to believe in him, and he'll give you wisdom. And then he says, seek knowledge so that you may have understanding. So when I have wisdom, Nathan, and I seek knowledge means I'm going to look at, I can help get through this AI information, this false information that's just everywhere. It's prevalent, that sometimes we won't check ourselves and we know something just seems off, but it's like, well, they said it, and you check it by 3 or 4 sources and it all seems right. But wisdom tells you something sounds off here, so I can have understanding. The scriptures tell us, and I'm a faith-based believer, and I've always been that way. I never push it off onto anyone, but I use that as my general barometer. And for you to say that keeps us up at night, but we're starting to see a shift because it's going to be individuals like us that say something seems just a bit off. Am I being manipulated into understanding from all sides of the aisle? I don't care if you're Republican. I don't care if you're Democrat. We're seeing it everywhere. But how do we have individuals like you? I have so many of my friends that are running for office. I've got a friend that's running for office. He's on the exact opposite of where you are. But when I sit down and talk to him, I'm having this same conversation with him. Very rational, very thinking through the process. I don't believe everything that he's about. I'm thinking, God, we need more people that are running for office that are principled. They're doing it for the right reason. So I didn't take it. Most people that might be listening might be thinking, Nathan sounded like, I know this seems cliche, but you have always said that to me from day one. Here in Texas, you have to work a full-time job. It's not like some other whatever, where you can maybe work part-time or they've got full-time legislators or whatever. In Texas, it doesn't work that way.
Not financially. We work full-time. We get paid very, very, very part-time.
That's so my standpoint is, but you have a passion for this.
I do.
And I've never seen anything like it. And so I will tell you, we're all in for you. I know our family is. It doesn't matter where you are on the spectrum of what party lens. I don't look at things through party lens. I look at things through who's the core of the person and what you're standing for. So I appreciate you, number one, coming on my leadership lab. I am hoping get out there and vote, especially if you're in the state of Texas. To know a little bit more about you. How do they see more about what your platform is? Where do they go? What do they look for?
I'm grateful to be on here, and I'm so fortunate to have misspoken at an event that led to our friendship, and I have grown as a person and politician through our conversations, through our disagreements, and through our agreements. So thank you. People can learn, and I hope they will. I'm on every social media channel at Nathan for Texas. We'll be rolling out a couple of ads starting tomorrow. If you don't see one, please go to my social media channels and you'll find them. I have a website, of course.
And you're on all social media channels, so Facebook,
Instagram, Twitter, Threads.
All those, TikTok maybe.
TikTok. I can't look at them all.
I know, it's like somebody else is managing
But
it all.
whatever your favorite channel is, you'll find stuff. You can find things where I'm speaking on the Senate floor, or you could find things, a video that I made that's criticizing this or that, or praising some other thing.
And if you were in Texas during some of the ICE stuff, what I loved what was going on, you helped with the whole ERCOT thing, the discussion of our grid, all of that. It's amazing. So do some research. Like, if you don't know who Nathan Johnson is, pretty brilliant attorney here.
I mean, I at least work hard, and thank you. And it's something that we didn't talk about here. I was described as never mind that. I've done a lot of work on the grid, and it goes to the idea that as Attorney General or as a senator, find out where we need help and do the work. And when Texas froze and our systems weren't working and our markets weren't working, that seemed to be the place to devote my energies. So the two areas I've worked the most on are healthcare and power generation.
And I appreciate all your effort and your work with Texans, especially as a senator. And I hope to be our next Texas Attorney General. So thank you, Nathan, for joining me here on the Leadership Lab.
Thank you, Asbel. It's great to be here.